Eric Lynn Wright, going by the nickname Eazy-E, wasn't supposed to be a rapper. Rather, he was supposed to focus on transitioning himself from a Compton, California drug dealer to a music mogul and owner of his own record label, which came to be known as Ruthless Records. But in audio achievements, a recording studio about 10 miles west of Compton, he was in a bit of a bind. You see, he had finally recruited a producer, Dr. Dre, as well as a rapper, Ice Cube. Dre had a hard thumping beat with paint strokes of slap bass, scratching, and a rock guitar riff for Cube to write a song inspired by movies such as The Godfather and Scarface. Cube had penned the song for himself while bored in his favorite class, English. Eazy had wanted the harder-edged stuff that he saw rappers like Philadelphia Schoolie D and fellow Los Angelino Ice-T do, and Cube and Dre had delivered. This song was going to be the first release out of Ruthless Records. Only one problem. Who was going to record it? It wasn't going to be Cube, since he was committed to his group, CIA, and Eazy wasn't a rapper. Neither was Dre, and he too had a commitment to the world-class Wrecking Crew DJ collective. So, Eazy called upon a group from New York living in nearby Orange County named HBO, an acronym for Homeboys Only. HBO arrived at Audio Achievements to record the song, but upon reading the lyrics, HBO, with their East Coast orientation, couldn't absorb the West Coast slang and atmosphere that pervaded the song. Apparently, staying in California all that while didn't mean they were acclimated to their environment. So they stormed out, leaving Eazy-E and Dr. Dre stranded, and wondering what they should do next. And that was when Dre suggested that Eazy-E, who had paid for the recording session and thus had the most to lose from the situation, record the song. Eazy may have been thrown into a recording booth, but he didn't look and sound the part. Rap music was used to relatively sizable and tough-looking guys with prominent deliveries. Eric stood at about 5 feet 4 inches and had a high-pitched voice. Worse, when he got in the booth, he had no sense of rhythm and flow, and Dre had to resort to recording one bar at a time. But Eazy had to do what he had to do. The alternative was to fall back upon his career as a drug dealer. Compton, a city in the middle of Los Angeles County, California, and about 20 miles south of Los Angeles, wasn't exactly bustling with jobs, and Eric wasn't at all interested in busting his behind for the few low-paying ones. Eric's parents, one a postal worker, the other a grade school administrator, were part of the Great Migration, a movement of millions of Black Americans oppressed by the racial segregation and discrimination in the southern states to other parts of the country. The Wrights, originally from Greenville, Mississippi, were one of the first Black families in Compton, which was almost exclusively white and started getting a Black influx in the 1950s. George H.W. Bush, vice president when Eazy-E decided to rhyme for the first time in his life, once lived there in a now demolished apartment complex off Santa Fe Avenue. It turned out that the West was really no different from the South. Amid the civil rights era, it would take decades for housing restrictions to ease, but at the cost of white flight, and then, eventually, middle-class blacks. Rising labor costs, less expensive manufacturing options outside the country, and technological advancements contributed to factory closings and, consequently, job losses in the 1970s. In the wake of so-called deindustrialization rose poverty, unemployment, and gangs, which caused businesses in downtown Compton to move someplace else. The two most notorious and best-known gang groups were the Crips, identified by the blue color they wear, and the Bloods, named after the red color they identify with and formed to protect themselves from the Crips. Eric was affiliated with the Crips, more specifically the ones who lived and operated around his neighborhood park, Kelly Park. Eric got compliments from the Kelly Park Compton Crips for the high-quality products he provided. But he was no gangbanger. Left to him, he preferred fisticuffs, and his scarred and hardened knuckles were evidence of that preference. Besides, Eric was only interested in making money. Dropping out of Dominguez High School, he fully immersed himself in the drug game at a time when crack cocaine, also known as radio rock because of not just its rock-like shape, but also because it's already freebased with baking soda and can be smoked, became very popular in these parts. The proliferation of this drug was made possible by Freeway Rick Ross, a trafficker from nearby South Central Los Angeles who relied on Nicaraguan suppliers and got a street team who made deliveries throughout the greater Los Angeles area on mopeds. But after a few years slanging that crack cocaine, Eric began to question the long-term prospects of such an endeavor. In 1982, First Lady Nancy Reagan launched the infamous Just Say No drug awareness campaign, becoming the most visible arm of the War on Drugs initiative kicked off in the 1970s. And her husband was big on the war on drugs. In addition, the Los Angeles Police Department, in response to growing gang violence and activity, established the Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums Intelligence Unit, also known as CRASH, which will eventually be infamous for their not-so-subtle crackdowns. For Eric, continuing to be a street pharmacist could only lead to two conclusions: jail or death. He decided he wanted neither. Plus, he was now a father. And on an additional personal note, his cousin, Horace Butler, who had been his mentor in the drug game, was gunned down in his truck while in downtown LA in 1984. So Eric was desperate to get out. He invested $250,000 in starting his own record company, which would eventually become Ruthless Records. There was no turning back now. In that Audio Achievements recording studio in 1986, he was going to let Dre record, stop, record, stop, record, stop at every bar or sentence if that's what it was going to take. The ordeal lasted for almost 9 hours, but the output was good enough to cut a 12-inch entitled The Boyz-n-the-Hood. Throughout the course of the song, Eazy-E gets drunk in the morning, dispatches a guy trying to steal his car stereo, beats up a girl who refuses to have sex with him and beats up her pops, gets into a car accident in his drunken stupor, witnesses his friend assault a cop and get thrown in jail, and ends his narrative with a courtroom shootout that involves his friend's girl attempting to free him, all within the space of 6 minutes. There's no remorse, no underlying strands of morality to be found in his raps. It was straightforward and frivolous nihilism from a man who was himself so immersed in the ghetto lifestyle he could never truly leave it behind. Eazy-E employed some of his homies from the neighborhood, collectively called snipers, to distribute the record at swap meets and record stores. E had inadvertently created what would become a rap music industry standard in the 1990s and 2000s, street teams. And in 1987, that propelled Boyz-n-the-Hood into becoming an underground hit. Eazy-E was now, again, inadvertently, the vocal springboard for a group he formed with Dre and Cube, as well as his friend MC Ren, DJ Yella, Dre's crew member from the World Class Wrecking Crew, and a Dre acquaintance who went by the name of Arabian Prince. Together, they were known as N.W.A, Niggaz With Attitudes. By 1988, N.W.A was recording songs for their debut album, put off by the fact that Macola Records, the manufacturer and distributor of Boyz-n-the-Hood, had exploited their local popularity by putting out a compilation the year before featuring the songs they had recorded post Boyz-n-the-Hood without their permission. There was something else the group had to confront. As they went on tour in 1988 with the 5 songs they had released so far, the others being 8 Ball, Dope Man, Panic Zone, and Fat Girl, it was obvious that Boyz-n-the-Hood was the most popular one of them all. Indeed, it eventually became Eazy's signature song, and it symbolizes his role in the still burgeoning field of a cruder, less compromising style of rap music, one that was kicked off by Schoolie D, furthered by Ice-T, and now in the hands of N.W.A. Gangsta rap. N.W.A.'s manager, Jerry Heller, had suggested as early as 1987 that they capitalize on the popularity of Boyz-n-the-Hood by cutting an album for Eazy, who began to look more like the star of the group. Good-looking, with the diminutive stature and voice pitch of a prepubescent, Eazy-E was a lot easier to swallow for a larger audience. Ice Cube was absent at the time, since he was in Arizona studying architectural drafting, but he was able to write some lyrics for Eazy, in addition to MC Ren and the DOC, whom Dre had lured into LA from Dallas, and Dre and Yella handled the beats.
Now that you got the album, You gonna do with it, bitch, bitch.
Think of Eazy-Duz-It, released on September 13th, 1988, as a sort of straight outta Compton duplicate, a companion piece to N.W.A.'s album debut. The recording sessions for Straight Outta Compton overlapped with that of Eazy-Duz-It. The former had come out the month before, so it's not surprising that the production here sounds awfully similar. There are some minimalist tracks here, comprising little more than concrete hard drum machines, such as the Boyz-n-the-Hood remix, more like a re-recording with more vigor and experience from Eazy,
Hey yo, man, you remember that Eazy did a while back? Said wasn't gonna work.
and the rumbling percussion featured in I'ma Break It Down. The edgier beats are perfect for Eazy's grisly subject matter, the hard funk of Nobody Move, courtesy of Rufus Thomas's 60-Minute Man, with a Yellow Man sampling hook being a prime example. But there's some live instrumentation too, like when session musician Stan the Guitar Man Jones and DJ Yella provide the funk guitar and drums respectively to greatly complement Eazy's energetic sparring with MC Ren in Two Hard Mothers. There are also the less threatening numbers, like the lighter funk of Easier Said Than Done, thanks to the samples from Rufus Thomas's The Breakdown Part 1 and the heartbeat interpolating Radio. But probably the best song is the party starter, We Want Eazy. It's the ideal encapsulation of the persona of Eazy-E as the fun-loving godfather of gangsta rap, with Dr. Dre hyping up the crowd and the entire affair inspired by Bootsy Collins's "Ah, the name is Bootsy, baby," from the melody and the crowd atmosphere to the bridges and random questions asked from audience members. But let's make one thing clear. Eazy-E was not a great rapper. His flow sometimes stumbles and wanders off the tracks. He has this thin, weak voice that sounds strained if he dares raise it to a certain level. In a genre that, perhaps more than any other, values writing one's own lyrics, Ice Cube, MC Ren, and the DOC all write for him here. And even with such assistance, Eazy was fed some comparatively second-tier material. Ghetto narratives such as the title track and even Boyz-n-the-Hood pale in comparison to N.W.A.'s Dope Man or I Ain't the One in terms of construction and insight. And then there's one track that had him come to a complete halt. Well, sort of. Ruthless Villain was one of the 3 tracks MC Ren penned for Eazy, but while both Eazy-Duz-It and Radio are evenly paced and rather frivolous tracks, Ruthless Villain is brutal and unforgiving with a relatively fast-paced galloping beat that occasionally sports a drum roll. Not easy of a beat to rhyme over for a novice like Eazy, so he lets the writer be the rapper as well, and Ren, as expected, does justice to Dre and Yella's beat. Ren was now officially the villain, but Eazy-E was going to sneak in here anyway, via the hook.
Easy control, and if you press your luck, I'll smoke you like that and won't give a.
Despite his limitations, Eazy-E made the best of them. What he lacked in remorse or depth, he compensated with his comicality, whether intentional or not. His high-pitched delivery became a tolerable, heck, almost adorable whine, wiping away most of the crassness of his extreme misogyny and homophobia.
He was once a thug from around the way. Easy, but you should
Shut the f up.
In a sense, Eazy-E sounds like a mere child in serious need of a scolding, not an unconscientious adult gangster. It's rather weird because he surely could have been crucified for objectifying a woman's private parts to the extent that it can be put in a freezer in Still Talking, or halting a robbery to get some from one of the hostages only to blast her to Kingdom Come after finding out that she's a transgender person in Nobody Move, or expressing his hate for male groupies as a thinly veiled attack on gays in Easier Said Than Done. In retrospect, he's not scoring any points with some of the LGBTQ crowd, that's for sure. Then again, he confirms he's not really a role model in the interview styled No More Questions right after he narrates a robbery he just conducted.
Oh, so you're not exactly a role model.
Not exactly.
And can you really be mad at a guy who jokes about being 9 years younger than he actually is? In We Want Eazy, the uncertainty about Eazy's age is injected in one of the interludes between the hooks and verses. Notably, the latter half of the album, specifically tracks 7 to 11, barely has any cursing. Radio in particular is about, wow, getting airplay. Imagine Eazy, the self-described hip-hop thugster, cleaning up his songs and spitting rhymes like this.
Now this jockeys are playing me in rotation, hitting #1 spots across the nation.
And two of those disc jockeys are Dr. Dre and Greg Mack. The former plays the fictional DJ of Ruthless Radio, and the latter is the fictional DJ of radio station K-Eazy-E, but in real life was, at the time, the director of K-Day, noted as the first radio station to play hip-hop on a full-time basis. Mack even employed Dre and Yella as the station's first hip-hop DJs. It's only at the last track, Eazy, verse 8, chapter 10, where Eazy returns to his vulgar ways, performing his best Rudy Ray Moore as Dolomite impression as recounts yet another hood murder. Still, half-hearted compromise or not, tracks 1 to 6 comprise the album's street side, and tracks 7 to 12 comprise its radio side. Eazy-Duz-It was platinum by 1989, just like its older Straight Outta Compton sibling. Lightning does strike twice. Somewhere in New York, an apprentice would emerge from his hustler roots to become a rapping music mogul. But before Jay-Z, there was Eazy, and if there's any record that deserves to be called the prototypical nihilistic rap album, it's Eazy-Duz-It. Even more than Straight Outta Compton, it delves deeper for the basest traits of gangsta rap. For Eazy-E, being the first N.W.A member to have a solo album, not to mention being the ruthless label head, made him the de facto leader of the group. That became more apparent soon after Ice Cube left N.W.A in 1989, thus allowing his cartoonish accounts about violence and sex to dominate N.W.A.'s later raps. Funny enough, being that subsequent records now make Eazy-E's debut sound rather tame in comparison, it's aging, not to mention the flow and delivery of a guy not meant to be a rapper in the first place, gives it a warm, amusing innocuousness not easily found in early gangster rap. By the way, props to Dre for being the rap version of Victor Frankenstein.